Storytelling Lane. Warning: this story is not suitable for children and may contain unsettling elements, which could be frightening to some viewers. For the ultimate experience, we recommend listening with headphones. Let the story fully immerse you. Welcome to Storytelling Lane. If you enjoy captivating stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, so you'll be the first to know when a new story is out. Now, sit back, relax, and let the tale begin. The House of Silence. John is a crime novelist suffering from a creative block. For months, he has been unable to find inspiration for his next book and decides to leave for a secluded place to escape the noise of the city and focus. He finds an advertisement for an old house located in a small village deep in the mountains. The house has been abandoned for years, and this seems like the perfect place for him to clear his mind. When he arrives, the house is surrounded by dense forests. Mist hangs low in the air, and the atmosphere is damp and heavy. Everything around it is quiet, but inside, the atmosphere is oppressive. The wooden floors creak, the walls seem to hold memories of long-gone times, and every room is covered in dust and silence. The house is an old Victorian building with large windows, now covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. Around it, there are signs of time seemingly having stopped. Inside, everything is preserved as it was left by the previous inhabitants. Chairs turned upside down, an unfinished cup of tea on the table, and a fireplace that hasn't burned in decades. The air is heavy and dark, and in the distance, only the wind can be heard, whistling through the cracks in the windows. John is a man in his mid-30s, sharp-minded but tired-looking. His eyes are dark from lack of sleep, and his hair is slightly disheveled. He wears a thick knitted cardigan and old jeans, ready to spend time writing and reflecting. In the first few days, John discovers an old library that captivates him with its many dusty books. Among them, he finds a personal diary that belonged to someone called the Master of the House. The description of the experiences of this person becomes increasingly vague and mysterious. He writes about strange sounds at night, shadows appearing in the mirror, and the feeling of being watched by invisible eyes. John decides to use these notes as inspiration for his new novel, but the more he reads, the more he begins to feel like the main character in his own book. The things described in the diary start happening to him. At night, he hears faint thumping, shadows move along the walls, and the windows sometimes tremble by themselves. John begins to notice strange presences in the house. At first, he wakes up to sounds coming from the upper floor, as if someone is walking around. When he goes upstairs to check, he finds one of the rooms lit by a dim light, although he hasn't turned on any lamps. In the room sits a woman, dressed in old clothes that seem worn but expensive from an era long past. Her eyes are empty, but she stares directly at him.
"What are you doing here? The house is empty."
Empty? No. We are all here. We have always been here.
And the woman disappears, as if she was never there. This first vision shakes him, but he decides to ignore it, thinking his exhaustion is playing tricks on him. The following night, while writing in the office on the second floor, John hears children's laughter coming from the yard. When he looks through the window, he sees two children playing, but their clothes are old, as if they came from the past. He goes down to the yard to ask them how they got there, but the children hide behind the corner of the house. He decides to follow them, but they have already disappeared. A moment later, in the shadows, he sees something eerie. The children's eyes watching him from a distance, as if they are spirits who cannot leave the place. To learn more about the history of the house, John decides to speak to the locals. But only the old man Tom answers his questions reluctantly.
What do you know about the house? The diary of the previous owner has strange descriptions. Something is not right.
This place keeps secrets, boy. The people who lived there were not alone. The house inhabited them, not the other way around.
What do you mean?
Some places shouldn't be visited. This house doesn't like intruders.
As the nights grow more ominous, John begins to doubt whether everything is just his imagination, or if something truly sinister is watching him. It becomes even stranger when he discovers that the diary he's been reading sometimes has additional pages that he doesn't remember seeing before. In these new entries, the master of the house speaks of a new inhabitant, a man who will come and uncover the secret of the house. John begins to feel a connection between himself and this mysterious character, as if the house knows more about him than he knows himself. Each new page reveals fragments of the past, but also raises more questions. Who were the previous inhabitants, and why was the house abandoned so suddenly? A few nights later, John wakes up to a quiet whisper and the smell of food. He decides to go downstairs to the kitchen, where he finds a sinister scene. The table is laden with food, and people of different ages, both old and young, are sitting around it. Their faces are pale and weary. He immediately realizes that something is wrong. These people are not alive, but they look as if they are frozen in this moment of time. One of the men turns to him.
Join us. Sit with us. We are the family of the house.
What do you want from me? What is this place?
We are part of the house, just as you will become.
When John turns to flee, the lights go out, and when he turns them back on, the room is empty, as if no one had been there. All of these encounters are only a prelude to the true revelation in the basement. When John discovers the mirror, he sees all these souls, the woman from the room, the children from the yard, and the family from the dinner. They are in the mirror, trapped within it like reflections that can never leave. Each of them has been consumed by the house, just as he is now on the brink of being. They watch him with pity, as if trying to warn him.
You cannot escape, just as we couldn't.
We have always been here.
This revelation is the climax. The mirror is the trap for souls, and the house is like a living being that keeps those who enter it. John starts to talk to himself as if to his second self, advising him to leave the house.
This can't be real. My imagination must be messing with me, right? The diary can't change on its own. Maybe you're part of the story. Maybe you were meant to come here. Don't you feel the connection? The house has chosen you.
John decides to escape from the basement. He slams the door behind him. Several days pass without any sounds or visions. He decides that it's all in his head and calms down. But one night, John hears noise from the basement, a place he doesn't want to visit. He descends with a flickering flashlight that casts eerie shadows on the walls. There, he discovers a hidden room filled with books, old objects, and paintings of people who seem unfamiliar, yet strangely familiar at the same time. All these faces carry his features. In the room, he finds a mirror covered in dust, but when he wipes it clean, he sees in its reflection not himself, but a person who resembles the master of the house. This figure in the mirror begins to speak to him.
You are the next one. Anyone who enters here becomes part of me. Of us. No one leaves the house without leaving a trace.
John realizes that the house is a trap for souls. Anyone who inhabits it becomes part of it and can never leave. The mirror is a gateway to something sinister, a parallel world where all the previous inhabitants have been consumed by the house and now live within its walls. The house is not just a building, but a living structure that gathers people and traps them in its story. Now John must choose to try to escape and leave his story unfinished, or to face the thing in the house and try to defeat it. John stands before the mirror in the basement, trembling. The face in the mirror, the master of the house, stares directly into his eyes, but this is no longer just a reflection. The figure in the mirror speaks in a cold voice that sounds both distant and close.
You know what you must do. You are the last one missing. The house calls you.
John feels reality begin to distort. The house seems to move. The walls creak. The wooden floor groans like living flesh. It becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish truth from illusion. A moment later, the mirror begins to vibrate, and the dark figure from the other side stretches out its hand toward him. John is on the verge of despair. The words of the old man echo in his mind. The house inhabits those who enter it. But something within him refuses to give up. He quickly grabs the diary from the floor and begins flipping through the last pages, now filled with words he doesn't remember seeing. On the final page, there is something written that shocks him.
To save yourself, you must destroy what connects you to the house, the mirror.
John realizes that the mirror is the key. It holds all the souls that the house has swallowed over the years. If he shatters it, there's a chance he can free himself and save his own soul. But he also knows that this action will destroy everyone who remains trapped within the house, including the master and everyone he has met from the parallel world behind the mirror. With his last strength, John grabs a heavy iron rod he finds in the basement and swings it with force to strike the mirror. It shatters into 1,000 pieces, each one reflecting a small fragment of his face and of all the others who had been consumed by the house. The shards scatter across the floor, and the air in the room seems to thicken. Suddenly, everything falls silent. The noises stop. The tremors of the house settle, and silence envelops the place. John wakes up on the basement floor, exhausted and confused. The mirror is gone, along with all its sinister reflections. The house is now quiet, but not in a sinister way, more like a release. Everything is as it was before, empty, calm, and still. There are no signs of anything supernatural. He exits the house and returns to the village, but when he tries to tell the locals about what he's experienced, no one believes him. The only person who shows any understanding is Old Man Tom, who had spoken to him before. He looks at him with quiet comprehension, but remains silent. It seems he knows that John succeeded, but also that some things are better left unsaid. John returns to his city, once again sitting before the blank screen of his computer. The words come easily now. He tells the story of the House of Silence, as though he lived it not only as a witness, but as a part of it. But just as he finishes the final sentence of the novel, he notices something strange. On his desk, among the other objects, lies a small piece of glass. It is smooth and clear, a shard from the mirror. He picks it up in his hand, and for a moment, he sees in its reflection something that makes him shiver. From the glass, the face of the master of the house watches him. Thanks a lot to everyone who stuck around until the end. It truly means a lot. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, so you'll be the first to know when a new one is up.